right, now how do you play this? This is too hard to actually play. I didn't want to have to actually play this. Whoa! Oh my god! Hey, Eric, what is going on? Ah, that's so weird. I literally just mentioned the Stafford, and then Eric just kind of appeared like a genie. He just magically... I was just about to do a Stafford lecture. Alright, I messed this up, by the way. I got distracted. Welcome, everybody. I have a present for you, Eric. I actually have a very small present. Not an actual present. It's a present in the form of some YouTube content. For me. So it's like you get a gift, but I get all the actual revenue. If you don't know Eric Rosen, I don't know what to say. Is there anybody in the world that doesn't know Eric Rosen? Let's not look at this. Let's not play chess. There's people watching. He loves presents. Perfect. Because I actually wanted to make a very short video on the original Stafford Gambit. So I think there's probably a lot of people that don't know anything. Nobody knows anything about Stafford himself, but he has one game in the database, Joseph C. Stafford. And yeah, the OG Stafford. And I can remember the game because it's 6 moves long, so I don't even need to find a database. It was played in 1950, the original Stafford Gambit, but he won with a trick in 6 moves. So it was really cool. Let's flip the board. So this is some guy named Lowens, and it was a correspondence game, which is also really impressive. So it went e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6. So the original Stafford Gambit, if you guys don't know, this is the Petrov, and the Stafford Gambit occurs after sacrificing a pawn with the move knight to c6. And after this this capture, you take it back with your d-pawn. And then I guess now everybody... Actually, we're using the database of Master Games, so there's not a lot of info here. So most people are playing d3. Or maybe they're playing knight to c3. They're playing whatever that defends this pawn. But in the Stafford game that made the Stafford famous, Stafford's opponent played e5, which is interesting. So this is not the actual game. And I actually want to turn this off so that we don't see by accident. Oh, here's how we can do it. Sorry, I have a smarter way of doing this. Boom! This is the smarter way of doing it. This way, we won't give away the notation. But in this position, knight to e4 was played, and white made a blunder here. White's still doing well, but d3 was played. Hopefully you guys can see the board well enough. And this is actually a losing move. So we got the chat on the screen now, and we got 1,000 people here. So we can probably figure out what to do here for black. So this is your turn to figure out what to do, because black is now actually winning. Yeah, I think people have figured it out. And so this is a cute little miniature. Bishop to c5. And this was the end of the game. This was literally, everybody sees it. This was the last move of the entire game. And it's not so obvious why, but black is completely winning. And it was a correspondence game. He's taught you well. Yeah, there's just this principle of attacking the f2 pawn as early as possible. So, for example, for example, you can't just simply take this knight. If you take the knight, we're going to be taking on f2. Obviously, if you take the bishop, you're losing a queen, and you're not even going to be able to play king to e2 because of bishop to g4 check. And this will skewer and win queens and stuff. It may look like potentially you have the option of playing bishop to e3, but this also fails. Just simply to bishop takes e3. What if you play the illegal move? You can always count on Twitch. You can always count on Twitch for a good king to d2. And the main point is, okay, you can't take the knight because it's exactly the same. If you take, you lose a queen. If you go here, you get skewered. And if you take the bishop, which looks like the logical move, hopefully everybody sees what to do here. What about f3? We can have a glance. But here, obviously, queen to h4 is the main idea. Queen h4. Everybody sees it. Everybody sees it. If you go up, it's mate. And the big problem is that g3 just simply loses a bunch of material. Because knight takes g3. So if you do this way, you're going to lose a whole bunch. Because you're basically going to have to take this knight and lose a rook. So yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. It's actually very clever. I think some people were wondering about f3 in this position. If you play f3 in a position like this, then simply something is going to go here. Probably a lot of things going there are fine. Ooh. So this is the obvious move. But I also just want to point out there's queen d4. But the obvious and winning enough move is knight to f2. So boom. This was the Stafford Gambit that put the Stafford on the map. But this is actually not the original Stafford Gambit. Does anyone actually know who played? I'm going to look it up. But if anyone can tell me, I know who it is. Who played the original Stafford Gambit? And while you guess, I'm going to grab it and put it in here. We're getting a little history lesson. Matthew Stafford. So this was actually the 4th game, at least in the database. So at least 3 people played it before Joseph C. Stafford actually played it. Ooh, don't look at the very end. But the original game, the very first ever Stafford Gambit, was played by somebody else. Not Garry Kasparov. Not Eric Rosen, surprisingly. Not Morphy. Oh, thanks, Pierre. Not Fischer. Not Rubinstein. It is a name that you guys probably will recognize. Most people will recognize the name. Not Casablanca. Not Cochran. Not Carlson. Not Botvinnik. Not Beth Harmon. Not Yasser. A lot of good guesses. Whoa! Whoa, Joe! Joe knows it. Staunton! Staunton was the first person on record to ever play the Stafford Gambit, and it was in a Simul 1857. So then it wasn't for another, tough math, 93 years that Joseph C. Stafford would play this one. But it was in a Simul, and Staunton actually lost. He lost to No Name. So he's just playing some Simul. We don't even know who he is playing. And he lost, but he was winning. And it's a very interesting game. So he was playing a Simul, and he was black. So it's NN versus Staunton, not the other way around. So we're not getting it wrong. It's NN versus Staunton. I guess they used to do it as black. So it's interesting. And for a long time, this is actually like still mainline theory. The first ever game went d3, still a very much recommended move. Bishop c5, bishop e2. This is very normal. And after h5, there's a couple different moves. I'm not a huge expert on it. Obviously, you guys are coming over. If you want the real stuff, you go over to Eric Rosen's YouTube channel. That's where you're going to get the real analysis of this position. But as I understand, I think c3 and h3 are the 2 main moves. h3 was played. Queen to d4, which I think is still the theoretical move. I guess I can actually use this database in front of me. You guys can't see it, but I'll use it. The No Name watched Naroditsky's video. Yeah, so the Naroditsky line is c3 here. But h3 is also a move, and I know there are some traps for black. So queen to d4, I believe we're still in Eric Rosen recommended territory, where I think most people castle, but maybe white played a similar and maybe even stronger move, rook to f1. I know after castling, I don't know all of the tricks and traps. I know there's a bunch. All I know is that you go here, you play queen to d6. You hope that they play g3, as so many people have done, and then you just simply win. And then there's some other stuff, like if they do something else, you play knight to g4, and then if you need full details on this, you go over to Eric Rosen's channel, because this is just a history lesson. It is not all the tricks and traps in the Stafford. So what happened, though, is he played rook to f1, which also looks like a very good, reasonable way for white to play. And white's got to be better. White's just going to be very soon doing the normal stuff, playing c3, trying to get the stuff out. But black is going to try to just keep active, bishop to e6, develop every single move, c3, queen d7, and here, and then finally sort of makes a mistake. And he plays this move, e5. And this actually gives away the entire advantage, if you can believe it or not. So all of a sudden, we're kind of in like equal territory here. Even though we're down a pawn, black's now going to have some excellent chances of opening up the position. He's ahead in development. So much better is probably sticking with the normal plan, which is to play d4, trying to suffocate this bishop, and trying to get all this stuff out pretty quickly. Because as we'll see, white does get into trouble, and black actually gets a winning position before throwing it away. So knight to d5, d4, bishop to b6, all looks pretty normal. And here white gets a little bit greedy. So white is way behind in development and decides to grab an h-pawn. And it's around now that black starts to take over and should be able to get some sort of initiative here. And it's based on attacking the center. First he castles, and after the bishop has to waste another move, plays c5. And black suddenly should be able to get a bunch of pressure against the center. These guys, white has a long way to go. He's got to get all this stuff out. And black just now suddenly has an attack against the d4 square. Doesn't make best use of it, but he plays well enough. So white just decides to trade. I'm a pawn up. He decides to trade. Bishop to e3. And around here, he plays f5, which I think is fine. If I remember right, there are some ideas of just taking and bringing the rook to h4 or starting with rook to h4. It's basically all about getting pressure here. There's also this rook kind of hiding. Sometimes this knight will move somewhere. So getting pressure immediately on d4 is probably the strongest plan, but f5 is still very good for black. He's thinking of maybe removing the defender of the center by playing f4. Not worried about any en passant. You want to open the e-file, go for it. And white decides to play bishop to g5. How do you lose this? I'll show you. He gets clever. It's actually interesting how you lose this. You lose it by being overly clever. When you get to the critical moment. So here his rook was attacked. He moves his rook. Queen to b3, which just runs away from the center. So this really shouldn't help white. And eventually we get this capture. Black gets his pawn back, and with huge interest. Totally winning for black. But it's complicated. It's actually still a very complicated position. White plays f4 to cement his e-pawn. Queen to c6 is a very good move. Knight a3. And it's in this moment that I will give you guys a chance. Here is where it starts to go wrong. The move that he played here was not a blunder, but it is starting to go down the wrong path. I'm in YouTube mode, so I'm only doing one hydrate. What would you guys play here with the black pieces? Knight to c3 being suggested. Knight to e3 also being suggested. It is definitely a knight move because one of the main threats we have in the position is queen takes g2. So we want to move this knight somewhere. And he actually did go to one of these two squares. One of these is the best move, and one of these is not the best move. And what's funny is, like, basically every knight move wins. The one he played it looks the most clever. Knight b4 is better than what was played in the game. This is better than what's played in the game. This is better than what was played in the game. Everything was better. Basically, every knight move is better. But in the game, he went to c3, which actually has a downside. That's not easy to see, because you have to understand how white is going to defend. But knight to c3, not the losing move, but he starts to go the wrong way. Perhaps not seeing what the next move was here for white. And again, we just want to take here. Maybe we want to come in and give this check. But, you know, if we can just take on g2, we should be able to win. But this gives white the opportunity. Obviously, he's not going to take the knight. It gives him the opportunity to play queen to c2 and defend the pawn. And black is still, like, better, but it's no longer clear. If you do end up taking this, you're just going to get killed. You can take back. This will win quite clearly. But I think you can start with this one also if you want to start this way. And if you walk onto the e-file, death is around the corner. You can take the pawn, or you can play bishop to e3, and it should be mate like really soon. And if you go here instead, this is clearly the simplest because it takes control of this square, and it's suddenly very difficult to properly protect this thing. Even if you go here, we're still going to be able to take this pawn. King's going to have to move. He's going to get hunted down. It's not going to get pretty, so probably you're going to have to sacrifice. And in the game, queen to c2 was played, and white's just trying to hang in there. He's holding on for dear life. Bishop to e3. And here he gets another opportunity to win the game, and he misses this one as well. Because here white takes, which is wrong. And now Staunton has another opportunity to easily win the game. If you find like one move here, you just easy win. So what would you guys do here as black? This is another interesting moment of the game. This is not a new gambit. This is the original Stafford Gambit. Rook to d8. There's a bishop that can take it. Rook to d8 is not the best move. g2. Queen takes g2 is protected. Queen takes c3, also a protected pawn. Bishop to d2. Lots of people saying bishop to d2. This is what was played in the game, and suddenly white is winning. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. We're going to come back to this one. Obviously, it's super tempting to get the king running. But rook to d7, said by Pierre, Blizz, Ethan, Luca, Metal, a lot of other people have said it. Rook to d2 is just easily winning on the spot. If you get the rook into d2, like it's game over, you're basically going to be able to play here. So for example, if they save their queen, obviously you can give them some material, but that's going to be hopeless. You just take here. And the problem is we have a couple of threats, a couple of mate threats. Obviously, we're threatening this checkmate. But even if that one gets stopped, there's another mate. You can play queen to g3, and you're going to have to block with the rook and get checkmated. So this wins pretty quickly. It's mate in 5 or something. But instead, in the game, after the knight was captured, he decided to give this check, which is obviously very, very appealing. What if queen takes d2? Then you win lots of material. After queen takes, black will win a lot of material, because we're going to start by taking this, and then it should get even worse if I'm able to grab this pawn. You have to keep your rooks connected some way, but it's not easy. If you go here, for example, there's this rook is going to be coming in, or there's some checks. I don't know if this looks clear enough. You get this guy in, and the king's running around. This should just end up really well for black. Maybe it's the best. I mean, it's better than getting checkmated immediately. But it wouldn't work out. Anyways, the king gets running, and it looks good. Like, maybe he felt good about it. Because he has this check, which is also a fork, because it's attacking the knight. But the king goes to g3, and now the king is actually safe. And what happens is, after he takes, white plays rook f3, and black had to resign. So part of the problem is, this was the very last position. It's over now. The game is just over. So one problem is that this is hanging with a very nasty, very nasty fork. But even more than that, if you save your pawn or whatever, you can just go here, and the bishop is trapped. So you're going to be losing the bishop. You're going to be down a piece, and suddenly the white king is safe. So I probably wouldn't have resigned here, especially in a Simul, but he's clearly playing a very strong player. And he actually gave up here. So it was, the Stafford started on a loss. Staunton actually had at least 2 chances to get a big winning position, but that was it. And then it went dormant. It went dormant for 90 years, and eventually Stafford himself, Joseph C. Stafford, heroically won in only 6 moves. And then sometime after that, 90 years after that, it was... Let's not fact check the math. 90 years later, Eric Rosen made videos nonstop about the Stafford, bringing it to true life. And that is the story of the Stafford Gambit.